Yeah.
Right, here we go. Icebreakers. Let's go. Favorite film? Not favorite film. If you could only watch one film for the rest of your life, what would it be and why?
Oh, that's a really difficult one. I would have to say Blade.
Because I've never watched it.
Have you never? Oh my! You're gonna tell me you never watched Star Wars now as well?
I have, but I'm not a fan.
Okay. So when I was growing up, martial arts and like the classical Schwarzenegger films were kind of my thing. Hence the reason why I joined in the Corps, right? And I used to go around to my mate's house, and my mate's uncle used to be in the SBS. And every time we go around, he'd always put Blade on. And we went to the cinema to watch it about 5 or 6 times. It was just awesome. It just had a bit of everything, a bit of action, a bit of drama, a bit of, moral dilemmas and stuff in it. And that's why I used to love that film.
Who's in it?
Wesley Snipes.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Same question for food. If you can only eat one food and why?
Steak.
Easy.
Straight up. I've been weight training since I was 13 years old, and going to like proper spit and sawdust gyms, and just just straight up steak was the first thing I learned how to cook, and I still do it now.
There you go.
Yeah.
Superpower. If you had a superpower, what would you have?
Oh, it'd have to be Superman strength, 100%. Strength stroke speed.
Yeah.
That's always been my thing.
Yeah. But like superpower, like full on strength, lift a house.
Yes. Strength, because strength comes with power, comes a little bit of speed with it as well. So I've always had a Superman fantasy. Even when I was a kid, I remember I went on holiday. I was lucky enough to go on holiday to America with my mum and dad, and I remember walking towards, I don't know why, it's mega random. Remember those, they've got loads of big like t-shirt outlet stores there. I remember walking towards the t-shirt store, and one day I just turned around to my mum and said, "Mum, can I get superpowers?" And she said, "You can do what you want." And that's where I was wondering.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Historical figure to have dinner with, dead or alive?
Historical? Ooh, I don't know. I'm not really a history buff, but I'd say one of my idols who's still alive now. Can I do that? Kelly Slayer, hands down. 11-time world surfing champion. Technically the GOAT of any sport. His outlook on life, lifestyle, and just the way he's gone from being, a proper grubby street kid in Florida to owning probably one of the biggest surfing brands on the planet. And he's like 50, nearly 60 years old, and he's still performing to the highest level on the World Surf League Tour.
Yeah, good inspiration. Last one, proudest moment.
Oh God, I don't have a proudest moment.
Got to dig deep.
Oh my God, I don't know.
Or a proud moment.
A proud moment. I don't have a proud moment, but proud moments are getting them back off tour alive. Those would be proud moments, because there's lots of people that didn't, and that those were probably the moments where I got back as like, fuck me, I shouldn't be here. There's lots of moments like that, getting back to your parents, or my missus, who's now my wife, getting back there and going, yeah, I got back. And it's really strange actually, and it's a little bit ironic, so I knew I was going to talk about this. Was every year I try and watch round about the time of the year. I know it's a bit out of sync. Some like World War II sort of like programs and documentaries, and what I mean by that, I mean like like the Pacific or Band of Brothers. And I just watched Masters of the Air. Have you seen that? Oh my God, it is probably one of the most horrific TV shows, showing the courage of the bomber pilots in the Second World War, like bombing Germany and lots of different
Name it
titles.
again. Was it not?
Masters of the Air. And it's like, do you remember Memphis Belle?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Memphis Belle, about like the forts, the American forts, which are like the bomber planes. It's basically about that, but more up to date one. And the stuff that they went through was horrific. I know you could argue that, you know, the guys that were on the ground doing the war fighting, you know, on foot, that was horrific too. But this is just like a different horrific. I mean, the only way that I could really kind of put it into a scenario would be is, imagine being on a bus and a bus can only go 5 miles an hour, but you've got to go through a gauntlet of machine guns and bombs and all sorts of stuff, and you cannot do anything about it. You just got to sit there and suck it up and hope that you get out the other end. And that's pretty much what that program depicts.
There's another one out at the moment, which I watched the other day, Surviving Black Hawk Down.
Yes, great, isn't it?
Because obviously watched the films many times. You know, you sit there with the lads and watch it. And I watched that the other day and I was like quite choked up watching that. I was like, fucking hell, it's horrendous.
But I think that's the first documentary or film that they portrayed out there that actually shows both sides of the story.
Yeah, it was clever.
Because I think it's very easy to get stuck with like these war films and documentaries and stuff, you know, like Vietnam or Afghan or the Falklands or whatever it is, and it always depicts the victor.
Yeah.
You know, the person, you know, the good guy. You never really hear the stories of, like, you know, there's no films out there about German soldiers.
Yeah.
There's no films out there about German families or whatever it is, and it puts that a good perspective onto it from the Somali families and stuff like that.
Yeah, it was massive.
And I thought that was like a really good little tie into it all.
Yeah, perfect. Welcome, Adz. Thank you very much for coming on. Eager to hear your story. I do recognise you. I've never met you. I do recognise you. I'm sure you were PT2 when I was in training.
Yeah, I'm a bit of a big deal in the Corps.
0506.
0506.
I'm sure you.
Yeah, so I would have. No, it would have been a little bit later than that.
Was it?
So I was on Herrick 5, 2006, 2007. And then I came back from there, and round about the summer is when I joined the training team. So it might have been the tail end.
So I was at CTC in the store waiting to transfer to the Navy.
That would have been it.
Yeah, that's where I recognise you from. But welcome. So I'm eager to hear about your journey, where you are now, what you do, all the stuff that you promote, which is cool. Take us back though. Take us back pre-Corps days. What made you join up?
So as I previously mentioned, you know, I grew up in a small town south of Birmingham, and my story joining the military is not like really anybody else's. You know, I didn't get beat as a kid. I wasn't molested. You know, I didn't get bullied and all that sort of stuff. Mum and Dad were awesome, still are awesome. They were all really supportive, but never push you into anything. So everything I ever did, they just kind of went, yeah, go and give it a go and see what happens. And when I was at school, you know, I used to play loads of rugby. I played up to pretty much semi-professional rugby. And I got to a crossroads in my life towards the end of high school doing my A-levels. I was doing the first year of my A-levels. And it was either go and play professional rugby or join the Corps. And professional rugby at that time got really kind of serious, and I was, and for me, I have to enjoy what I'm doing to you know, to be able to make something of it. And rugby just kind of went out the window a little bit because it became more of a chore. It became like, if you don't perform well in training, you're not playing in the game. And I used to excel playing like on game day. I wasn't really great at training. And going back a little bit from there, my mate's uncle was in the SBS, and every time he used to come back on leave periods, he'd tell little stories of what he'd been doing and about the Corps, and I was like, yeah, that sounds awesome. And my dad was a reservist in the Fusiliers. He used to run what's the Obua building in Salisbury Plain called? What do I want to say? he used to run the Obuwa village, and Salisbury Plain anyway, when he was in the reserves. And his dad was in the Polish forces, so he was like in like the SAS equivalent during the Second World War. And so there's kind of like a bit of family history with the military. And anyway, my mate's dad, uncle was in the kind of told these stories, and I was like, yeah, let's do that. And there's about 10 of us overall at school would say, yeah, we're going to join the Royal Marines. It's going to be awesome. And then when we left, I was the only one that did it. Little did I know that the Corps was endurance based, and I was a sprinter. As I mentioned, I used to go to the gym quite a lot, do like quite a lot of functional training, beach arms, beach chest, all that sort of stuff. And I joined up training, and then hated the next sort of like 12 to 13 months of my life because it was fucking horrific. And ended up joining the Corps and doing 22 years out of it in the end, really. But I always look back on it and go, like, I never really excelled. From a personal perspective, I was never really one of these people that excelled in anything. When I was at school, I just kind of floated through it. Even when I was playing rugby, I was good, but I had no one really like to push me to go like, you could be amazing if you did this. It was all very much like off my own back. So as I was going through training, I mean, for me, it was like it was like the tail end of like the old school of like the old Falklands guys.
What year did you go in?
I started in 2000.
How old are you?
I am 43. I don't know why I'm thinking about this. I should know all of this. But yeah, so I joined the Corps in 2000, and I think all those guys were like proper, like old school island, like vet guys, and everything you did was wrong. I just got screamed at, and I didn't learn anything. It was just basically like, suck it up, pass these things, and then you get out of the back end of training. And my section corporal, I'm not going to mention his name, is a mate of mine now, absolutely hated me with a passion. I'm really kind of like, I'm really relaxed. Like everything I've ever done, I've always like got relaxed, sort of like dog shit face. Don't have any sort of show any emotion. And all the training team and stuff used to say that I was never trying. I just didn't I didn't show it. And I really kind of struggled through that quite a lot. I made some really good friends out of recruit training, but I struggled a lot. I got thrashed every single day. Every single day. I think the worst thrashing I ever took was I was at Straight Point Ranges, and the corporals were bored one day and made me put my respirator on, crawl the length of the ranges, and then at the very end of it, because I had a Brummie accent at the time, they made me do burpees saying, "Oh no, bastard." And I just did about 1 million of them. And even now, some of my mates that I was in training with, they go, "Oh, Lison, oh no, bastard." They do that all the time. And yeah, it was kind of horrific.
Good old straight boy in and out of the trench hopping.
Yeah. Yeah, the ranges were always like, weirdly enough, bearing in mind the job that you partake in, right? You join the Marines Commandos or the British Armed Forces or the Paras or something. You would have thought that they would train you to be like, use this inverted commas, steely-eyed dealer of death. I couldn't shoot for shit. Like the annuals weapon handling test, it used to take me like 9-10 goes to figure it out. It wasn't until I was 2 years out of the box that actually someone told me that on your SUSAT, you have to counter turn your sight drums and tighten them up so the sight didn't rattle on the top. No wonder I didn't fucking pass anything, you know. And I was just like shit at everything because I never got taught anything really.
Must have been good at Fizz though.
Huh?
Must have been good at Fizz.
No.
No? Went on to be a PTI.
So again, this is the ironic thing. like the irony of this is that if you'd have said to me when I was in recruit training that I was going to become a Royal Marines PTI, bearing in mind the Royal Marines PTIs are, you know, what peak physical fitness and excellent looks like within the British forces, let alone the Royal Marines. I was shit at running. Anything to do with load carrying, I was horrific. I used to blame short legs, but later on, you know, it was just I was just shit. But my upper body stuff was okay. You know, I could bench press, I could do all the gym stuff. Okay, rope climbing was absolutely fine, all the power stuff and the weight bearing stuff. But anything to do with endurance, I was really bad at. Fast forward, you know, 12 years into my career, I got to the end of my 4th Afghan tour, and I decided that I needed a change in direction with my career because my cat lives had got lost along the way, and I was just like, you know, I'd written a couple of death letters and put them under my bed because I didn't think I was coming home, and I was like, what can I do? I'd already done like briefing courses for SF and passed them, but never actually went on to selection through lots of other sort of like stumbling blocks of life along the way. So I thought, you know, why don't I become a PTI? And then that way I can control the running pace and I can do this. So I can control this and I don't have to do it anymore. So I used to hate running in a group. Yeah, my sergeant major at the time was a PTI and a lot of my friends were. I came back off the tour. We had 2 weeks on camp, 2 weeks of leave to take, and then we went on like our full pottle. And then that time I did my aptitude and passed it. And then the following January I was loaded onto the PTI course and did it, and I just stuck it out and passed it and became a PTI. So
Off you went into your career.
well, that was halfway through.
Right.
So I'd already spent. I passed that training in 2001, and I went up to Kamach doing the nukes and stuff. So I did like all the different areas, did all the MIOPS training, but never got onto a team. So I ended up swapping a draft with somebody to go on a heavy weapons anti-tanks course. So for those of you who don't know what a heavy weapons anti-tanks course, it is shooting big 50 cal machine guns and shooting missile launchers and blowing shit up, and it's a fucking cool job. And you got to do that and be a ground soldier as well. So you got the best of both worlds, really. So I went down and did that course. And then while I was on that course, September 11th happened. And then after I passed my anti-tanks course, we were all drafted straight up to 4-5 Commando. Within 4 months, we were out in the Hindu Kush looking for the Taliban in Afghanistan. So it was a pretty steep learning curve, if I'm honest. And then I came back from that, and then we literally had 6 months again, and then we were out for the invasion of Iraq. And so we literally just bounced from one thing to another. And then I ended up getting drafted down to 4-2 Commando, and the Op Herrick's just started. So a few of my friends went out and did Herrick 4, which was like the building of Camp Bastion. And they went out and did that. And then I got, excuse me, I got picked up for a promotion to become a corporal. So I went back to Lympston and did my corporal's course, and then literally came straight out of that, had 2 weeks, went and did some pre-deployment training in Lydd and Hyde, and it was basically the paras and the army that had been out there previously saying, every time we step out the gate, we just get fucking smashed. We get ambushed, we get attacked. We can't really go 500 meters from our gate because we just get shot at and blown up, and they took fucking loads of casualties. Loads, and that was in Sangin. And so yeah, I was just sat there with a bunch of other lads, and we were going, oh, fucking hell, like, you know, sounds pretty bad, like, you know. And the unit had already gone out, so 4-2 Commando had already gone out at this point, out to Camp Bastion. And I was really close with a lot of guys from a company, M Company. I'd been in with them for 4 or 5 years. I'd taken them like adventure training, surfing, and arranged lots of different things, and loads of really good close friends. And I thought I was going to end up going back to my old troop, and I didn't. I ended up going to J Company, and J Company ended up going out to a place called Goresh, which is sort of like halfway up the Helmand Valley between Lashkar and Tajaki, and ended up having the best 7 months ever, because we were doing what the SAS did like back in the Second World War. We were the Mobile Operations Group, which meant that we were bombing around in armoured Land Rovers. So if you sat in a Land Rover, you had the driver. He had like a machine gun strapped to the front of his vehicle on the bonnet. We had the anti-tank missile system, the Javelin, which was on there as well, and we had loads of missiles and stuff, loads of ammo. I had the GPMG in front of me, so the general purpose machine gun, and then we had a 50 cal machine gun, which was on the back, and the whole floor of the back of the Land Rover was just loaded up with ammunition. And our job was just to bounce in and out of the Helmand Valley, finding where the different Taliban positions were, and just going in, just smashing and killing everything. And it was awesome. Like it was amazing, and it was quite a unique experience. But unfortunately, I got blown up 2 weeks before the end of it. So we were there was an operation at the end of the tour called Op Silver, and it was one of the first multinational led like coalitions between the Estonians, the Americans, the British, and I want to say the Danish as well. And Sangin, within Afghanistan at the time, was kind of like the hotbed of like where all the Taliban were coming from. They were coming in from Pakistan, going straight into Sangin, and then from there the Taliban were bouncing out of there like up to Kabul and all sorts. And one of our jobs within the mobile operation group was to recce the routes for these vehicles, and it had been there, and there was lots of vehicles. There was like all the stores vehicles, there was the 105 artillery guns that were with us, as well as like all the foot soldiers, so like all the Marines and the guys in the back of tracked vehicles called Vikings that were going to go out and do all the assaults and stuff like that. Anyway, we were probably about 2K outside of Sangin, and there was this big ridge called Crocodile Ridge that separated the sort of like desert and the mountains to the green zone. And I bombed off to go and have a look at like a separate route because the ground was really boggy. The vehicle went down like a little bit of dead ground over some shale, and then went over the shale and went over an anti-tank mine and blew up. My front left wheel, so where I was sat in the passenger side, that's the wheel went over the anti-tank mine, blew me out of the vehicle and sent me about 40-50 meters away, and I landed like a cat on all fours like this. I was like, I must have lost consciousness, because I just remember waking up in like a big dust ball, and I was like, you did the old checking my arms, checking my legs. Yeah, got all of them, and ended up running back to the vehicle, which you're not supposed to do in a mine strike. My lads were all right. The vehicle was fucked up, and but what had happened is that we were in like a load of dead ground, and all the convoy was just going along the high ground across the top. And what had happened is that one of the lads had answered my call sign when the boss had asked if everybody was all right. I said, yeah, everyone's all right. And I wasn't. We were obviously in the bottom. So I ran it up this hill to the convoy and stopped them and told them about it, and ended up running all the way back down again. And then we started getting moored. I was like, fucking hell, this is horrific. And what had happened was, is the guys that had planted the anti-tank mine, which is probably about as big as this table and probably about a foot deep, and it says what it is on the tin, right? It's an anti-tank mine. It's designed to blow up tanks, right? And we went over it in a Land Rover. The two guys that had set it up were like halfway up the ridge, and the guys had pinged them and basically like killed them. But they were bringing in mortar fire, so that stopped. So a couple of rounds came in, and those guys got taken out, and then everything kind of like started to sink in what had happened. The adrenaline dump went. I'd bust my arm and got blast injuries to my eyes and my ears and stuff, and yeah, I was in a bit of a sorry state. I was more disappointed that I hadn't finished everything off with the lads. And I did finishing the tour, going home with them, then having to go back. But unfortunately, during that incident, later on in that day, 3 of the Vikings got hit and a bunch of lads got killed in that. And I was on the plane. I got Kazivaked back to Kandahar. And I ended up being on the plane that was taking all the lads that had been injured. And I was like, oh my God, this is fucking horrific. Like, and I felt real bad because all I'd done is dislocated my wrist and had some, you know, I couldn't hear properly really. And I was sat on this plane going home, and all the lads are sat in this like stretcher and stuff, lying there unconscious, with the nurses going around on the on whatever plane it was taking us home. And I was really nervous about ringing my missus because we were supposed to get married on our leave period. So I'd got blown up. I was in the hospital. This is before we got on the plane. And I said, can I ring my missus? And I rang her up, and she's like, oh, is everything all right? I said, look, don't fucking freak out, but I've been blown up. And she's like, you what? I was like, yeah, I've been blown up. I'm in the hospital. I'm in Kandahar. She's like, I'm coming home, but I'm all right, so don't worry about it. Anyway, I got back to Selly Oak in Birmingham, because they fly you back. I think we went to Bryce. I can't really remember. I think we went to Bryce, and then we got on a coach or in an ambulance and drove to Selly Oak, and they basically like released me from there. I didn't feel guilty, but I felt like this is a bit fucking rubbish because all the lads were like there, and I had like this little cast on my wrist and stuff, and I went, and like within this is how fucking quick it was, and it's kind of iconic of what happened to me on all the tours that I did. I literally got back into got blown up, and within 72 hours I was back in my house at home. I was like, that this is like thinking about it, it's fucking mental. So imagine like today, right? Been in a massive contact, you know, the adrenaline's going, you might have shot a couple of people or whatever, or something major happened, your mate got shot. And then like you go back, pack your kit, you fly home, takes a day to get home, and then you're back in your house within 72 hours. Imagine that. That's pretty much what happened to me on like 4 tours. I never had any like trim or like what you call it? Not mental health, blood decompression. I never had any decompression or anything like that. I was literally like back home within like 72 hours of doing something. It was mental. And anyway, I really brushed over Herrick Drive there, like real fucking quick. But I came back from that, and then they asked for volunteers to go back to the Commando Training Centre to take recruits through training. And I said, yeah, let's do it, because nobody had been really in a big massive contacts and big battles since the Falklands, really, and that was only 2 weeks long. I was in it every single day for like 7 months. Pretty much like every day, I think maybe every other day, we were like in a contact or in a firefight for like 3 or 4 hours, maybe up to 8. And you get, and yeah, I'll go to Limpston, take some recruits through, which is where we might have might have bumped into each other a little bit, and yeah, and it was really funny actually. So I remember doing you have to do like a pre-training team sort of like course and skill arms course. See, I've only been out 3 years and I forget all the fucking names of these courses. You do skill arms course to teach people like how to put weapons together and how to use weapons and tactics and all this sort of stuff. And you're basically just showing that you're competent and capable of putting a lecture together and delivering it to a group of people. And did that course, and then I remember joining Chatham Company, which is one of the 4 companies that take recruits through. And I went into the Sergeant Major's office and he went, "Right, Corporal Lison, we're not teaching people here to go to Afghan, we're teaching people generic warfare. Got it?" And I was like that. I got fucking told that I'm coming here to teach people how to survive contacts because I've just been doing it for 7 months. And you're telling me I'm not teaching people like warfighting, not going to Afghan. Fucking are. These lads that are passing out of training in the next year or 2, they're going out to Afghan. I don't know where the fuck you think they're going. Anyway, I didn't like that. And yeah, I got put onto a training team and ended up doing that for 3 years at CTC. And then I ended up getting drafted back to 40 Commando and going out on Herrick 12 with them. And yeah, that was a really interesting tour. Most casualties that the Royal Marines suffered, I think British forces suffered altogether, not just the Royal Marines, from IED strikes. And it was a really different tour because Up Jacana had gone on, which was like football patrols back in 2002. You were walking through the mountains. It was like an elaborated mountain training, really. You know, Iraq was different again because you were vehicle borne or football and doing patrols around Basra and Qasr and places like that. Herrick 5 again was different. We were footborne, but also vehicle borne, bouncing in and out, and there wasn't an ID threat. You could just drive and do whatever you wanted. And Herrick 12 was completely different. Again, you couldn't go anywhere without an IED threat. So the Taliban digging explosives into the floor, into walls, or something like that. And yeah, we took over from I think it was the Grenadier Guards, maybe. And they had some horrific horror stories. Like every single day, they lost somebody to an IED. And we went up to a place called Fob Inkerman, which was the northernmost outpost along the 611 road that linked Lashkar, Gresh, Sangin, and Kajaki all together up towards sort of like Bagram and the Pakistan border. And it was just littered with IEDs like everywhere. I think on that tour we were in better vehicles. We were in like bomb-proof vehicles called Mastiffs and Huskies. And I think on that tour I got blown up 22 times altogether. That's like, but I was also liaison with the Americans as well. So like towards the end of the tour, the Americans came in and they were trying to clear the 611, and I was liaison with them. I was basically like a forward operating observer, like calling in air. It was fucking random. Never done it before in my life, but I was like in contacts all the time, and they've got these big vehicles called, I used to call it a Gruffalo. It's not a Gruffalo. It looks nothing like the Gruffalo from the story. It's called a Buffalo, and it's like a big long vehicle with a digger on the front of it. And there are 2 vehicles that went along, and they were like mine detectors. And as they went along, they sprayed the ground where an ID was. They then backed off, and then this Buffalo came along with the digger, digged out the ID, and the guy that was like the engineer that was in, the American engineer that was in the vehicle with me, jumped out, put a few explosives on it, blew it up, and then they carried on, and that's how it all went on. And yeah, I mean that that whole tour was just kind of like really frustrating. The hierarchy was frustrating because they couldn't pull the trigger or anything. We were held back through our rules of engagement, and also the movement was really slow. I think to do about a 2K patrol took about 6, 7, 8 hours maybe. And it was the summer then as well. So it was like 40, 50-degree heat, all your kit, ammunition. I'm not sure whether you can say, got these little backpacks that stopped like radio signals from radio controlled IEDs and stuff. So it was a completely different tour again, and it was still kinetic, but this time, if you got shot at, you couldn't dive into a bit of cover because you didn't know if the enemy, like the Taliban, were making you dive into that bit of cover to blow you up. Literally, if you were in the open ground and you had like a spray painted marking plan that someone had like mine swept at the front of the patrol, you just literally fucking lay there and then waited for them to run to a safe area for you to be able to go into it. And that was really scary. And again, I'd written a couple of death letters that I put under my bed for that as well, because I didn't think I was coming there on that one.
Any point in those contacts do you go, fuck it, I'm moving?
And what do you mean?
If you're under fire and you know you can't move out that area, but you're under heavy fire, are you making a call to go, fuck this, I'm going?
From a commander's point of view, because I was section commander, also became troop sergeant at the time, and we didn't have a boss. There were times where you're like, just go and do that real quick. And you're running, and the bloke's got the Valen, and you just open that. As he's doing it, it doesn't squeak like real loud, because then you're rolling over it. But there were times when we were in vehicles again. So at the end of the tour, we were in Jackals, which are like better Wimmicks. I don't know really how to explain it. They're like big trucks, but again, they didn't have any roof or windscreen or anything like that on a weapons platform. And I remember me and my mate Sten, we were kind of like overwatching this wadi. And we got told to move off. And he was probably about 20, 30 meters away. And he literally just moved forward, and all he heard was, oh, fuck, what was that? And Sten's driver, Bo, was our like lead Valenman, and like he was epic. Like the dude found so many IEDs and cleared like so much stuff. Saved a lot of lives, like that guy did. And he got out of his vehicle, vanned it, cleared it, and basically there was a fucking massive barrel IED full of explosive. And what had happened was that the initiator, so the percussion cap on the top of the IED, had gone off, but it hadn't set the barrel off. And we were like, fucking hell. And this is how bad it was. We were late coming into like the company form-up point, and when we pulled in, our OC was going fucking mental. Even though I'd said like we'd had a near IED strike and we would have all been fucking killed. We pulled up and he came over. He goes, "Well, I tell you to fucking get over here, you get over here." And I was like, he nearly died. And I was getting angry. And our sergeant major, who was a PTI at the time, really came over and like kind of like settled it down a little bit. And this is when the leadership of the whole of the unit, the hierarchical leadership platform there, I felt was really lacking. The lads were fine, sergeant and maybe colour sergeant, like those guys there were kind of cool, but like the whole sort of overhead bosses, they were very focused on, this is what we've been told to do, this is what we need to do, regardless of what happened. And I started to get real frustrated with that a little bit. So Herrick 12, did that. Yeah, so after I finished Herrick 12, um, like I mentioned before, we never had like any decompression from that. We got flown back, and as we were coming back to Cyprus, we had the commanding officer with us, and the BBC were back at 40 Commando, and all the families had been arranged to be there. So we had no decompression. We literally flew into Cyprus, maybe had a couple of beers, got told to go to bed, woke up super early the next morning, and got on the coach from Bryce-Norton and just fucking drove straight back to camp again. And it was just a big parade. All the families were there. The BBC were there doing an interview. I got interviewed, photos taken, got put in the newspaper and stuff like that. But again, there was no like, this is what you need to do. These are the numbers you need to call and stuff. Like if you start feeling like weird and stuff, if you start having problems mentally, none of that.
Can you remember going from, like you said, such a quick succession to that? Obviously, there's that sense of relief, like you spoke about, and that sense of being, I asked you what you were proud of. But that is probably overshadowed by fucking hell, what's going on there? Just to be taken out of one environment in quick succession and straight back again. How does that affect you?
Well, the first time I ever really experienced it was on the back of Opticana. So like I mentioned, Opticana was 2002, straight after 9/11. And you're in wide open spaces. So imagine like Dartmoor or a national park or something like that. Lots of wide open spaces and no real built-up area. Even like when we were back in Bagram Air Base, everything was still like really kind of spread out. And when we came back, I remember getting back home, and my mate said, "Oh, let's go to the pub. Let's go to the bar." So I ditched all my kit, got changed, and my mate was at a university in a place called Solihull, just south of Birmingham. It's got quite a decent university there. He was studying architecture. And we go to this like quite nice kind of wine bar, and we get there kind of early. I was always fucking early to the pub. Yeah, first in, first out sort of sketch. And it was kind of quiet to start with, having a couple of pints, you know, chatting to some of his mates and stuff, and it starts to get busier and busier. And the busier it got, the more angry I got. And the reason why I was getting angry and I didn't realize this, it was the close proximity of people. Now, you know, when you go in a club or whatever, people start knocking into you. The more inebriated they get, you know, they have a few drinks, they're not really too bothered, they're banging around. And it was annoying me a lot. And I got to the point where I got so fucking angry. I said to my mate, I'm going to have to go or do something because I'm going to start fighting in a minute. And I didn't want to do that. I remember walking outside and he came out and chatted with me, and I was like nearly in tears as well. And I was like, this is, I don't really know what's wrong. I didn't really like put anything down to it. I was just kind of like, I just got frustrated in a bar, and then I sat down and thought about it at home again. Remember, you know, we're talking about there's no sort of like people telling you how to feel at the end of this or what's going to happen to you from being in certain situations. And I remember figuring it out and just going like, it must be because of this. It must be because I've gone from being in this situation to here. And that leave was the first time that I had never ever gone anywhere. Like, you know, as I mentioned, I'd been surfing since I was 14, so I'd done quite a bit of traveling, like before I joined the Corps, or Australia, Indonesia, places like that. Just board bag, surfboard, backpack, travel, surfing, meeting people and stuff like that. But I didn't do it on this one. We had like 2 months off. And I just went home, and I just remember the whole time I just got fucking wasted. And it was probably the worst thing I probably could have done. And it was to the point where like every single night I was trying to get people to come out with me. And I don't think it was like to hide the fact that I'd seen some stuff. And that tour wasn't really kinetic or anything like that, but it was like, it was the first time that I'd ever seen a man beat up a kid, or like punch a woman, or see, you know, gunshot victims, or, you know, stuff like that. So it wasn't like me doing it, it was me like seeing it from a war perspective. And yeah, I just kind of put it down to that. So going back to kind of like, you know, what you're saying is, each time that I came back, I just I've always had like tick lists in my head. So what was the hardest thing that you've done to date? Right, that's the tick list. Right, the next thing, oh, you've gone on this exercise, or you've got this jump up this fucking massive mountain. Well, I've done harder than that next time, like last time. So we can do it. Mentally prepare yourself, physically prepare yourself, and off you go and do it. So I'd kind of had like these tick lists in my head already. So like, right, what I'm going to do is, when I come back, I'm not staying at home. I'm going to go away and do this. And that anchor, I call them my anchors. Surfing and jiu-jitsu are my anchors, my mental anchors, is that me coming home, spending a couple of days seeing my mum and dad, or whatever, girlfriend, and then jumping on a plane and fucking off somewhere in the middle of nowhere where no one knows me, can't get in touch with me. I just go and do what I want to do. It was my way of, like, I think, dealing with that decompression. Like me kind of like just sitting in the water, board shorts, waiting for those set waves to come through, just turning, and all I'm focusing on is my surfing, and that's it. And I found that, you know, that's been from, you know, from the age of 14 all the way up till now. It is one of my things, is how I deal with stuff. So you know, Herrick 12 became a PTI. And one of the other reasons why I became a PTI as well was just because I wasn't really good doing physical exercising, like in a cohesive group. I always found doing like speed marching or yomping, or being made to do something or go somewhere by somebody else, always had like a mental repercussion for me. I always struggled with it quite a lot. So becoming a PTI, I led that. And then I wasn't going to be that guy that was like, right, you're not keeping up, you're a shit bloke. You know, I was always kind of, being a PTI, you're supposed to enthuse people, inspire them, give them little tidbits of how to be better, teach them to be better, physically and mentally. And that's kind of, you know, what I wanted to do and want it to be. I didn't really know that at the time. I basically did it because it was something fucking different.
Can you remember what you were like as a PTI with a nod troop? You know, like some lads are fucking harsh, as in like instructors. What were you like?
I was harsh but fair, and I made, even when I was a recruit instructor and not a PTI, one of my things that I made for sure was that if I gave corrective PT, thrashed somebody, I told them why we were doing it. Not, get on the flank, you're fucking shit. Like, I'm putting you on the flank because you've got rust on your gas parts. I'm putting you on the flank because you haven't washed your mess tins for 2 days. You've got dirt all over your face. You haven't done this. You see where I'm coming from with this? So there was always a cause to the effect. So that's how I always was. And actually, ironically, I did ask people that I'd taken through training after a few years later, and said, how was I as an instructor? Was I a wanker? Was I all right? No, you're like, you were fair. I was quiet. There was times where I did flip out, like, a lot, especially the first troop I took through after Herrick 5. I was definitely very angry.
That's not as a PTI though. That was as a
recruit instructor. And as a PTI, I definitely felt like I had far more empathy because of the experience I'd gained. one of the things that I picked up, and I'm not going to mention names, was when I was a PTI, I'd been a corporal for nearly like 10, 12 years. And I remember being on the gym floor, and on the gym floor, when you're doing Swedish PT, you do a press-up routine. So it's like the four corners. So you do press-ups to number, and then you do, 10 as fast as you can. You remember all this because you're smiling, right? But I remember, and it was all about form more than anything, doing the press-up the correct way without dropping your hips in, bum being out. And it was all about word of command, but keeping your form because your posture's correct. And it was training you for like moving on to the next stage, right? Your core stability, which then this core stability, if you've got good, strong core, you can rope climb, or you can get over 6-foot walls, or you can get across rope obstacles. And I remember the press routine. I was striking, so I wasn't taking the session. I was one of the guys that was checking the recruit's form, and you'd bounce in, give him a little bit of a correction, and come back out. And a couple of the new PTIs that had just passed out, they were going fucking mental. They were running up to recruits that were being rubbish, kicking them over, pulling their arms out, screaming at them that far away from their face. And at the end of the session, I was like, that's what you're doing. And they're like, what do you mean? I was like, why are you screaming and kicking them over? He's like, oh, what happened to us when I was in training? And I was like, that. Okay, let me ask you this question. When you were a recruit and the PTI was doing that to you, did you enjoy it? And they're like, no, I hated it. I said, well, why the fuck are you doing it to them? Like, why are you kicking them over and making them scared and putting them off or maybe hurting them? Like, why are you doing it? And they're like, I don't know. They didn't really have an answer for it. Got really defensive because PTIs are quite alpha. And it just started turning into a bit of an argument. I just thought, these blokes are fucking wankers. But I don't think you really kind of understand that until you gain a little bit of experience and you can kind of like reflect on yourself a little bit, like the PT world, right? You do your PT course, being a Civi PTI or PT, and you don't actually really become a good PT until maybe like 3, 4, 5, 6 years down along the line, when you've had a bunch of clients and you've taken people through different training programs and you can see what the nuances are and what most people fail at. And you do end up pressing play quite a lot of time to repeat yourself over and over again. But you only ever become good at that by having experience from it. And but unfortunately, the PT branch, when I was there with those lads, they knew it all already, and I was the same rank as them. So it was basically like telling your equal peer how to do something. Like, fuck off, mate.
Not even with experience, though.
Nah, I was a little bit frustrated with it, to be honest with you. And look, without sounding really big-headed, it's probably quite long in the tooth as well. But I was always like that with people towards sort of like the second half of my career, and even now as an instructor taking Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, owning my own gym. I mess about with people. I'm really dry and sarcastic, and if people ask stupid questions, I give them a fucking stupid answer, but then I'll go back and I'll answer them, and I have a little bit of fun with it because you've got to do something to entertain yourself as well, right? So that's kind of where I learned that a little bit, was like I've always tried to, like we talked about with the films at the very start of this, right? I always try to look at two perspectives: my perspective at the way I'm looking at it and the way you look at it. So two enemy forces, the British, Afghanis. Always try to look at it both ways. And I think if you can do that, it makes you a better person.
Yeah, I would second that, mate. And as I've got older, I'm 45 this year. I've gotten much better at taking a step back from things, not just flashing in and being that mediator and looking at something from above and seeing two arguments or 2 points and whatever it is. I'm quite quick now at saying, yeah, but maybe it's because of this, because I've spent my life in a very aggressive lifestyle and very my way or the highway sort of thing. So for me as a coach, it's helped me evolve. And I think it's experience and getting older to be able to step back and just take a breath and just go, let's have a look at this, rather than that emotional chimp making the decision and just flashing straight in there. Because look, we all make mistakes. I've made some, catastrophic mistakes in my career in terms of decisions made and all sorts. So that's how you learn though, isn't it? And that's how you grow and become better.
One of the things I've learned from being a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu coach and instructor is that just because let's use the analogy that being a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, you're classed as like an expert, let's say, right? But just because you're a black belt in Jiu-Jitsu doesn't make you a good coach. Makes you good at Jiu-Jitsu, it doesn't make you a good coach. The way that I kind of sell myself is I'm not a competitor. I'm not a world champion. I'm not a social media mogul. I'm trying my hardest to be a social media mogul, but yeah. But I haven't got like a big platform where people know me. But what I do have to offer is that I know I'm a fucking awesome instructor because I've coached mental health. I've coached physical fitness. I've broken down a normal human being to make them a Royal Marines Commando. I've also trained people on a physical level to go from just being your average Joe that goes to the gym to being an Olympic level athlete, which you are when you pass out of Royal Marines training as a PTI. Incorporating that into all the other coaching things that I've done, surf instructor, boxing instructor, blah, blah, blah. Again, not, shooting shit up my own ass. But if you put that all together, having lots of different coaching styles and being around lots of different people and seeing how different people do things, then I've taken the best bits of all of them, I think, and put them into the way that I portray coaching and the way that people learn. Because I think if I've only got one mindset of like, this is the way I'm going to teach it, and if you don't understand it, you're an idiot, you're a shit instructor. You need to understand the way that people learn and how they pick things up. Some people are good at reading something and they can go away and do it. Other people, they have to see something physically and then they go away and practice it over and over and over and over again. And then they become proficient at it. Some people can see it first time, the very small percentage, and go, fucking, yeah, done it. And they complete it. So being able to put all that together and put it into the coaching style, whether it's jiu-jitsu, whether it's my therapy business, whether it's the breathwork stuff that I've been doing, and putting it all together, hopefully, and with my career in the military, being able to put that across has made people a little bit better, maybe.
So given what you just spoke to us about your career and the hardship that you've endured, how do you see yourself now with the stuff that you're doing in your own mental state? Like, how have you managed to make that transition from a ton of shit and using up all your lives, as you said, to being an inspirational, like powerful, deep, that was a deep conversation we just had. I'm bought into that massively. Like, my question is, how do you hold it together?
I don't really think of it like that. I don't think of it like that. I mentioned before, like using something as an anchor, I think is very important. I'd love to see some studies on this. I'm sure there is. I'm sure there's some studies on this, is that what the percentage of people are that leave the military after like going to Afghan or seeing horrific things like, Vietnam, Second World War, blah, 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 all that sort of stuff, right? they go from that to nothing, is the people that have got mental health issues or struggle through the rest of their life because they haven't got something to look at. So whether it look forward to, I mean, more than anything. So whether it's jiu-jitsu, whether it's surfing, whether it's weightlifting, whether it's, I don't know, CrossFit, I don't know, hill walking, climbing or something, some form of escapism that gives you something to look forward to. Now, there are a lot of the guys that I know, I don't like to say, people that have like committed suicide and all this sort of stuff, from being in the military, their whole being, their whole life, their whole identity was the military. Take that out now because they've finished their career, they don't have an identity anymore. They've had that identity since they were like 16, 17, 18 years old, if they've done like 22-year career, 30-year career. So to try and reset and recalibrate themselves and reintegrate themselves into society, I think is quite difficult. Now, yeah, you could argue that the majority of people that suffer with mental health issues, PTSD and all that sort of thing, probably had like a bad upbringing. They came from a broken home or whatever. I have read some papers on that, and it does suggest that the majority of people that suffer with those kind of issues have had some form of issue when they were a kid, which has resonated later on in life. But I also think that if you don't have a focal point, you don't have something to grasp onto, then you are going to struggle. And I think that needs to be supported by your family as well. If your family doesn't recognize it, and doesn't tell you about it, if you're like changing or, they see that you're really quiet, I think sometimes that can be quite deficient to you as well.
So that focal point that you mentioned, let's finish up by talking about your stuff, what you do. You've mentioned it, but you've got a facility in Exmouth.
Yeah, so I run a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu academy called Mahara Jiu-Jitsu in Exmouth. I also run a holistic therapy clinic as well called the Devon Bowen Clinic, which is in the back of the gym, and that's doing something called the Bowen technique, which releases muscle tissue and helps sort of like with sports injuries by using the body's fascia, the connective tissue. And also my wife has just completed a 3-year degree doing cognitive behavioral therapy. So
Right.
she also does CBT now out of the same therapy route.
Yeah.
So, we've kind of inadvertently made like a little wellness like hub, in a little space on a shop front in Exmouth.
And clients, what's your type of client that comes in?
So jiu-jitsu wise, anything from a 16, well, we run kids classes between 8 and 15
That's the
years.
in thing at the moment, isn't it? The last 5 years or so, jiu-jitsu is like massively taken off. I think it has. Everyone seems to be getting involved in it and doing it.
I think so. I think it's a really fast growing sport, probably because of the emphasis with the UFC and another, grappling productions that are becoming more forefront, like football and stuff like that. I think people's feeds and social media feeds, they see it a little bit more, and they're a little bit kind of drawn to it a little bit more, I guess you could say.
Quick fire benefits of jiu-jitsu in a mental resilience, not so much the physical stuff, but mentally, what we got?
So jiu-jitsu's hard. Like, I'm not slagging off other martial arts, but I am a little bit. It's not like karate or taekwondo where you're going through like katas and learning sequencing. Jiu-jitsu is a combination of like judo, wrestling, submission grappling with like arm locks and chokes and stuff. So you're basically learning how to kill somebody, like with your bare hands, if you want to be cheesy about it. But in a nutshell, that's what you're trying to do, right? And jiu-jitsu's hard because if you've ever grappled with somebody else, if you've ever tried to physically restrain somebody else, it is graft. It's hard work. You know, like if you never played rugby before and you go and play a rugby match and afterwards you feel like you've been in a car crash, right? Because your body's not conditioned to it. It's very much like that. But what I really enjoy about jiu-jitsu is there is no set right or wrong way of doing something. So for instance, it's all about calisthenics and movement and body movement patterns, biomechanics. You're trying to figure out how somebody else moves while you're trying to choke them or snap their arms and their legs and react to that before they do. So it's like human chess. So I'm trying to better the other person before they better me. And in a nutshell, that's, you know, what it is. And it's jiu-jitsu is for everybody, but it's not for everybody.
Yeah.
Because it is hard. And it does take a lot of resilience, consistency, mental power to, one, get beaten up every single fucking day or every time you go training and go, do you know what? I'm a little bit weird. I like this. I'm going to go back the next day and do it again and do it again. So I think you do have to be a special kind of weirdo to do it.
Yeah.
But I think if you do stick to it, the benefits over the years are significant. And it's not like, you know, I say, not like other martial arts. It can take anywhere between 10 and 15 years to earn a black belt. So the belt system, how it works, is generally between 2 to 3 years to go through each of the belts. Now, you can become a karate black belt and a judo black belt in 2 to 3 years if you really kind of, you know, knuckle down and do it. But to become, you know, a Brazilian jiu-jitsu or jiu-jitsu black belt, it takes a really long time because there is just the versatility of it is just, it's endless. You know, just because I do something, teach something one way, doesn't mean that your body type and the way that you do it and the way that you move is different. So when I teach something, I teach the principle of it. It's then up to you to go away and use your own mind and your own body biomechanics to put that into practice and use it in a way that you can.
Awesome, mate. Adz, hell of a story, mate. And I bet that's not even fucking...
We haven't scratched the surface. Yeah. And that, I don't know, how long was that, right?
Listen, we'll drop some links below in the YouTube for your bits and pieces in Exmouth. People can look at it. People can find your socials. We'll put them underneath. Mate, absolute pleasure. Thank you for sharing.
Sweet.